Under the Rosh Yeshiva, the WebYeshiva, and we're going to learn together a little bit of the Parsha of Tetzaveh. The Parsha of Tetzaveh, as you know, is about Big Day Kahuna, about the clothing that the Kohen was destined to wear when he did the Avodah in the Beit HaMikdash. There were two sets of clothing, the kind of clothing that the Kohen wore all year long. And then there was the clothing that the Kohen wore on Yom HaKippurim, which were not the same. In fact, in the parasha, the different articles of clothing are mentioned, like a shirt and an undershirt and pants, but there's no way actually to know how they looked, how these items of clothing looked. A hat and something on top of his shirt. We know what they are called, but we don't know exactly how they looked and what they were, and even the attempts to determine what the Kohanim wore at different times of the year. Those attempts cannot be proven. You can't really say that we know or we saw or we did it. And nobody who saw the Kohen Ba'avodat Tov, the Kohen serving in the Beit HaMikdash, nobody who saw the Kohen serving in the Beit HaMikdash made the clothes or took a picture of the clothing that he wore. So, in fact, the pasuk in our parasha begins by saying, "Vata akrei lecha et Aaron achicha." I want you to bring him closer to you. That means designate him. Make sure that everybody knows you're talking about him. Vet banav ito, and his sons, mitoch bnei Yisrael echano li. I want you to bring them close to you. That means designate them. It's going to be known that we're talking about them. L'chano li, they will become the Kohanim. L'chano li, who was the Kohen? I guess Moshe Rabbeinu was the Kohen. We haven't got time to work that out, but there's no doubt that Moshe Rabbeinu was the Kohen before Aaron took over and his family. Moshe Rabbeinu was the Kohen, but his family did not become Kohanim for reasons that are not clearly explained in the Torah, but they seem to be correct. V'tok b'nei Yisrael echano li. And then the pasuk says, Aaron, Nadab, Avihu, Elazar, Itamar. He had 4 sons, b'nei Aaron. These were the 4 sons of Aaron that we're talking about, Aaron and his sons. So that's a departure from Moshe Rabbeinu, whose sons did not follow their father in the authority of the Kahuna. All right, pasuk bet, Vasita big day kodesh la'aron achicha. And so here we have a designation about the bigadim. The bigadim is that they are kodesh. The big day kodesh. Kodesh in this case means they are used as part of a ceremony. Specifically, where if the Kohen does this, then he has to wear these bigadim, and this is when the Kohen does something that is connected to korbanot, to giving the korbanot, to being part of the procedure of korbanot. He should wear these clothes. These are big day kodesh, and then la'aron achicha, fine. And then the pasuk comes up with 2 mysterious words, לכבוד ולתפארת, which is really the ultimate designation of the Big Day Kahuna. What are Big Day Kahuna? לכבוד ולתפארת. How do you make Big Day Kodesh l'Torah? It doesn't say exactly. But the words לכבוד ולתפארת are here so important that there's no doubt that if you knew how to do that, you would be able to make Big Day Kahuna. So Big Day Kahuna are not the clothing that the Kohanim wore, but it was the clothing that the Kohanim received as part of Binyan Beit HaMikdash. The Beit HaMikdash was built, the outer peripheries, the Aron Kodesh, the menorah, the Ketoret, the Mizbach HaKetoret, all of these things were part of the building of the Beit HaMikdash. The big things and the small things, right? And amongst the smaller things that were built for the Beit HaMikdash are the Big Day Kodesh, the Big Day Kodesh for Aaron. And the words, Lekvod Veltferet, say something about the Big Day Kodesh, which is not so easy for us to kind of follow. We don't know exactly what that means, but we could take a stab at it. The kavod is a word, honor, the honor. It's also a word that's used to represent the presence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. In other words, make the begadim worthy of the presence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Make the begadim, the clothing, so that when the Kohen Gadol goes into the Kodesh Kodashim on Yom Kippurim, he's in the right place and not in the wrong place. So we see that begadim are like a key. The word kavod says it's like a key to entering the place where HaKadosh Baruch Hu is to be found. And then there's the word letfaaret, lechavod or letfaaret. It's like you tell the tailor, you have to make the clothing lechavod or letfaaret, and somehow he understood what you were saying, but we don't understand. Kavod, we managed to explain, but tiferet. I mean, how do you know when tiferet has set in? The third pasuk, V'ata tedaber el kol chachmei leiv, asher mileitiv ruach chokmah. You speak to the people in charge, chachmei leiv, the people who have a wise heart, asher mileitiv ruach chokmah, which I have filled up with the spirit of chokmah. In other words, they're special. They're special people. V'asu et bigdei Aaron lekadsho lechano. And they will be able to use this special quality that they have. V'asu, they will make at bigdei Aaron lekadsho lechano li. So, lekadsho, bigdei kodesh. The kacho, not only the begadim, but the begadim have an effect on the person wearing the begadim. And let's look at the Rashi. V'ata tikra b'elecha. V'ata tikra b'elecha. 1 second. V'ata tikra b'elecha lachar shetigmor melachta mishkan. Then you start with the big day kahuna. Okay, this is a different problem that we have, which we're not dealing with right now, which Rashi relates to in a small way, and that is that Truma and Tetzava repeated in Vayakel and Pekude. Truma and Tetzava begins with the big, and then the smaller items in Tetzava, and in Vayakel Pekude it's the opposite. But here, Rashi explains to us that Ata hakrev elecha, Ata hakrev elecha. V'ata hakrev elecha et Aaron achicha. Rashi says, Lachar shetigmor melechet hamishkan. That's the parsha of Tetzaveh. Al yid likadsho lichano li. Again, likadsho means to designate somebody as being the one who does this certain kind of avodah. L'kadsho l'chano li, l'kadesh, l'kadsho, l'hachniso, v'kehuna. In other words, to designate him, to make him the kahuna, the continuation of kahuna. And so Moshe Rabbeinu's sons do not get that charge, but Moshe Rabbeinu gives it over to Aaron, his brother, who then becomes the Kohen Gadol. Al Yedei, Al Begadim, Sheyeh Kohen Li, that somehow the Begadim have this effect on making the worthy one, Aaron, the one designated to be a Kohen. With a Shon Kahuna, Sherutu, so okay, that's what Rashi says. Now, of course, what we have to do is see if there is a greater attempt at making this clear. We think we know about Kavod, but we don't know about Tiferet. So in order to learn a little bit about Tiferet, we have to read what the Ramban wrote on this topic. The Ramban, again, what the Ramban wrote on this topic. I'll see if I can make it a little bigger. Yeah. The Ramban. לכבוד ולתפארת. You see the first wide line on the page. Again, שיהיה נכבד, כבוד, ומפואר, תפארת, במלבושים נכבדים ומפוארים. I want to point out that this sounds like something very that you could say before you got married. You know, you'd want to get malbushim, nichbadim, umefoarim. And with these words represent a secular attempt to look good, to live up to a certain notion that you have about begadim. Kimo shamar hakatuv kichatan yichahen pe'er. That's one of the ways that he is described at the close of the Chatan yichahen pe'er. Right? Pasuk b'Yeshayahu ki ele habegadim levush malchutein. So here you have the Ramban. He's trying to help us to understand. I mean, because you think that it's a fancy kind of clothing, that's why the Kohen has to wear it. I mean, what's the big deal if the Kohen wore regular clothes when he went to do whatever he does? Why does he have to wear clothes that are lechavod, which we spoke about, and now tiferet? And tiferet, according to the Ramban, is levush malchutein. Levush malchutein are the clothing of the kings. Kedemutan yilbash hamelachim. The kings wear that kind of clothes, but you know, the kings, there's nothing sacred about what they do. But that's what the Ramban wants us to do. Tiferet is a word that is described for us by regular words, by regular ideas. Vizman HaTorah, that there were kings, the kings had fancy clothing, and that's what we're talking about. We're talking about the fancy clothing of the kings, which is something that uses a model for the Kohanim. Kimo shematzinu b'ketonet Vasulo Ketonet Pasim. We saw that Yaakov, when he wanted to give a present to Yosef, he made him a ketonet, a coat of pasim. The pasim, maybe it's colors. I don't know exactly what it is, but the Chazal say a different perush. Shepirusho mirukemet kidmot pasim. Mirukemet, the 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 coat that Yaakov made for Yosef was of rikma. It was not pasted on. The pasim were not pasted on. They were part of the fabric. They were part of the fabric itself. The pasim, the he ketonet tashpetz, and it's a special kind of a ktoret, Moshe Perashti, as I have explained there. Will be show kiven malchei kedem. He dressed him. Yaakov dressed Yosef like he was one of the kings of the world at that time. V'kein haderech b'me'ilo, b'me'il, v'kitonet. The same thing is true with the coat that the Kohen wore and the kitonet that he received. V'katuv v'al aleha kitonet pasim, v'aleha kitonet pasim. That on top of that he wore this embroidered coat, pasim kikain tilbash benot hamelech habetulot. This is the way that the daughters of the king, the virgin daughters of the king, would dress themselves, so they would know that they were okay. Me'ilim shetita alehem bahem. ונמצא שכתוב קטנת הפסים עליה מלבוש עליון, ולכן אמר וכתונת הפסים אשר עליה קראה. והמצנפת ידוע גם היום, and this is interesting, the מצנפת is a hat. Yudua Gam Hayom, today it's also known to us, the Melachim, that the kings wear a special hat. Ulisarim Agdolim, and the major officers of the court also wear a hat, a special kind of hat. V'lachein Amar HaKatuv B'nefol HaMalka Aser HaMetznefet V'areim Ha'ateret Yecheskel, Pasuk Yecheskel. So again, it's talking about losing your malchut. That somehow what the Ramban has explained is that the clothing that is associated with the Kohen and the Kohen Gadol, that clothing was known in his time as being the kind of clothing that kings wear. It was very, very, so Tiferet equals Malchut, according to the Ramban. And the Malchut that we're talking about is real Malchut, the Malchut of kingship. That, so, L'chabod u'leteferet, kavod, we sort of understand. And then the Ramban is explaining to us what Tiferet means. Tiferet means something that is so special that only the king wears it. Because the king is interested in showing that he's the only one. There's no one else like him. There's no one else with him. I mean, so we could easily transfer that idea to the idea of kuhuna. But the Ramban didn't do that. He just said that the clothing that the Kohen wears is the same clothing that a king wears. And the clothing the king wear is there to make sure we understand that there's only one Kohen and one Kohen Gadol, and only the Kohen can do it. And this is all part of the idea of Tiferet. That's what Tiferet. You have to distinguish yourself. The Kohen has to distinguish himself from the rest of the Kohanim, the rest of the people, that only he can approach the Avodah, the service of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's what the Ramban has explained, right? As we go back to Mitznefet, ידע גם היום למלאכים ולשרים הגדולים, לכן אמר כתוב, בנפול הפסים אשר עליה קראה, המלכות הסר המצנפת ברם העטרה. וכן כתוב, וצניף מלוכה, וכן יקראם הכתוב בערי המגבעות, right? וכתיב פאר פשטים יהיו עליו ראשם. So you have these psukim which indicate that the king had a hat and that the hat was very important and the hat made all the difference. She'em pe'er v'shevach le'machtirim bahem. V'ephod v'achoshen, the breastplate, levush malchut. They are also called levush malchut. Levush malchut, that you expect a king to have a breastplate. Kinyan shekatuv v'amanicha di dava, right? The thing made out of gold, al sabarech, on around your throat, but seats, and then he's talking about the seats, which is a band around your head, the Kohen's head. But seats, it's also something that kings would like. Uchtiv, get seats. There's Nizro. Vehem zahav va'agaman utchelet. And these things, this list of things which are all part of kingship, and the attempt to be the only one, to make sure everybody understands that you are the only one. Vehem zahav va'agaman utchelet, these precious metals, and argaman and chelet, which is also precious. Uchtiv, kol kvod, kvoda bat melech benima, mimishpatzot zahav levusha. Uchtiv, there's another pasuk, agivana dilbash, hamonaicha, the dava. על צווארך, והתכלת גם היום לא ירים איש את ידו ללבוש, חוץ ממלך goyim. And it's true. I mean, the Ramban knew that the problem with Chelet was that the political entities around Eretz Yisrael, starting with the Romans, forbade anybody from using the Chelet in his own clothing, because the king of Rome used it for himself. In Esther, Mordechai yatsa milifnei hamelech bilbush malchut chelet bechur ater zahav gdola v'tachrich butz agaman veha tachrich hu ha'me'il sheyatov bo. Okay, sheyatov bo. So the Ramban has explained to us what Tiferet is. What Tiferet is is whatever a melech would wear. That tiferet is a word which is, I guess, in this system of thinking about things, synonymous with malchut. Now, there are two ways. There are different ways to get to malchut. I mean, one way is to be the son of the melech. Another way is to be the one who wears the clothing of the melech. And here we're talking about becoming a king. I mean, Aaron became the king, the only one who was able to connect to HaKadosh Baruch Hu in this manner. So the Ramban feels that even though he's explained to us what this all means, we're missing something. And so the Ramban says, well, Derech HaEmet, as you know, is the Kabbalistic understanding. And the Ramban himself said, this is not a Kabbalistic commentary that I'm writing. But sometimes he can't help it. He has to say the Derech HaEmet because the Derech HaEmet clarifies things in a very important manner. לכבוד ולתפארת. לכבוד ולתפארת, right? We explained kavod. The Ramban explained tiferet. יאמר שיעשו בגדי קודש לארון לשרת בהם לכבוד השם השוכן בתוכם ולתפארת uzam. So there you have it. There you have it. The Malchut of Yisrael, according to the Kabbalah, the Malchut of Yisrael is contained in Klal Yisrael. He says, Yomar sheyasu b'gadei kodesh la'aron l'shoret b'hem lechabod Vod Hashem ashochein b'tocham. In other words, the Kohanim, in this regard, represent all of the Jewish people who have the ability to go into the Mikdash, the Mishkan, first the Mishkan, and then go into the Mikdash. They have the ability to do that because they went through Matan Torah and Kabbalat Torah. We'll get to that as well. Where their experience enables them to be worthy of going into the Beit HaMikdash, and they are represented by the Kohanim, and the representation of the Kohanim, of Aaron HaKohen, HaKohen HaGadol, they represent the Malchus in Am Yisrael, which enables them, the Malchus, the word Malchus means kingship. A king can do things that other people can't do. And so the king in this case is Aaron HaKohen. He is able to go into the Beit HaMikdash and to have kind of communion with the HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And that he does that as the representative of Klal Yisrael, and the kind of proof that we know about that he's able to do that. That he's able to do that is, that proof comes from the fact that he wears Bigdei Kahuna. The Bigdei Kahuna. V'chein l'tfa'er makom mikdashi u'makom ragli achabed, right? That this is something special is going on. Sheyu makom hamikdash mifo'ar betiferet u'makom raglav shehu makom Beit HaMikdash, that Raglav Shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu is in the Beit HaMikdash, right? There's a kind of a Mechubad B'Kvod Hashem, Mechubad B'Kvod Hashem, which is what we said, that somehow HaKadosh Baruch Hu allows himself to be in that particular place more than other places. V'chein u'v'Yisrael yitpa'er. Also, Yisrael Yitpa'er, that Bnei Yisrael are the ones who have this koach in them to come to HaKadosh Baruch Hu in the Beit HaMikdash, and the avoda, they are represented by the Kohanim. Sheyem mar'eh miyached bahem tif'arto. That somehow the Tiferet of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, since we kind of wearing the big day Kuhuna, we're demanding the Tiferet. We say, look, we have Tiferet, and there's Tiferet in heaven, and we want that Tiferet in heaven to be with us. And it says in the world that we live in, Gam b'bigdei habanim kulam lechabod hamizbeach ritzono v'kavod beit tifarto. And then he ends up with the following interesting comment: Vayu habegadim tzrichim asiyah lishman. And we all know that when you made the big day Kuhuna, it's like today we think about making a talis or making a tefillin. It has to be in the shman. You have to have the intention that the tefillin will be used for the purpose of the mitzvah. That's asiyan lishman. V'yitachen sheyu tzrichim kabana. And he says, since the big day Kuhuna had to be made for this particular purpose, so they were special. And this idea that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is waiting for us to make the demand of being in the Beit HaMikdash and trying to organize our avodas Hashem in a proper manner. V'yitachen, he says, sheyu tzrichim kavanah, that when you when you made the big day Kuhuna, you needed kavanah, and what kavanah means. V'yitachen sheyu tzrichim kavanah. ולכן אמר, ואתה תדבר על כל חכמי לב, Hashem mileti ruach chachma. And that's why it always says in the avoda that in building the Beit HaMikdash that there were chachmei lev, but not good enough to be chachmei lev, to be smart and to be competent and to know how to work the various objects that had to be made. Chachmei lev, good. Hashem mileti ruach chachma. But beyond the chachmei lev, they are mileitiv ruach chokmah. They have some sort of divine inspiration about making the big day kuhuna. Sheyavinu ma sheyasu. They have to understand what they are doing. If they don't understand what they're doing, then it's not going to come out. V'chvar amru, right? Mutar diukno menatzech lefanai. Beveit Milchamet. I want to just before we leave to add on something that the Meforshim of the Ramban all add on. That's from the Gemara in Yuma Daf Samach Tes Amud Aleph. There's a story, and the story is about Alexander Mokdon. Alexander Mokdon wanted to destroy the Beit HaMikdash. V'natnu lahem bo v'hodia et Shimon HaTzadik. They went to Shimon HaTzadik, who was the Kohen Gadol at that time. So what did he do, Shimon HaTzadik? Lavash bigdei kuhuna. He wore the clothing of Kuhuna, Bigdei Kuhuna, V'netatei Bigdei Kuhuna. They covered himself up with the priestly garments. Netatei Bigdei Kuhuna Miyakirei Yisrael Amo, and he brought with him all the important people of Israel, and they were carrying torches that lit up the area. Amar lahem, mi halalu. So they said to him, Amru lo Yehudim shemardu becha. They told him, his people, that these are the Jews who denied your authority, Alexander. Shemardu becha. Kevan shehigia la'antipatros zarcha chama upagu ze bazeh. That when they got to Antipatris, zarcha chama, the sun came up. And before they had these torches for the light. Zarcha chama pagu ze bazeh. Kevan shera'a l'Shimon HaTzadik. Since he saw it, Shimon HaTzadik saw what was going on. Yarad merkabto v'ishtachava lefanav. He got off of his chariot and he bowed down before him. Amru lo melech gadol k'motcha yishtachave liyehudi zeh. And so these people said, "Why are you bowing down to this Jew? He's not he doesn't have an army. There's nothing." Yehudi zeh amar lahem demut yukno shel zeh menatzachat v'beit milchamti. He says, I had this dream, and in the dream I saw this person. Amar lahem lama batem amru efshar beit shev mitpalelim bo alecha ve'al malchutcha shelot techarev od avrech kochavim la'achrivo. So the story starts this way. We'll do it again. This is the story of Shimon HaTzadik and Alexander Mokdon. May Alexandrus Mokdon la'achrivo v'netanu lahem bo v'odiu et Shimon HaTzadik. Ma'asa, what did Shimon HaTzadik do? Lavash bigdei kuhuna v'nitatev b'beit kuhuna. Shimon HaTzadik knew that he would not be able to speak to Alexander Mokdon, who was the king of Greece at the time, and unless he was able to impress Alexander Mokdon with his standing, and that he, Shimon HaTzadik, was a great Jew, possessed the quality of malchut, and so it was a king against a king, talking to each other. So this is also what the Bigidei Kuhuna of Aaron HaKohen are, since they derive somehow from the non-Jewish kings, the way they dressed, somehow so it has also got an effect on the non-Jewish king, and that's the story of Alexander Mokdon and Shimon HaTzadik. So we now know more or less that the Torah was trying to tell us that the Bigdei Kahuna are very important because they represent the achievement of Am Yisrael. The achievement of Am Yisrael is that they're able to have dveikut with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. They're able to come close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And part of the coming close is the malchut with which we approach the malchut in heaven. And that's represented by the words kavod and tiferet. Kavod meaning the presence of God, and tiferet means the malchut of the presence of God. And that we have the opportunity to do both of those things. And that was the chiddush that the Ramban had, in which he said, this may be Kabbalistic, but it's correct. Right? There's a kind of a Kabbalah. You don't have to be a Kabbalist to know that this is correct. That's what the Ramban meant to say. So, okay. All the best. We'll see you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.